You're now listening to Sound Talent Media. Check out more shows at soundtalentmedia.com.
If you went on a road trip and you didn't stop for a Big Mac or drop a crispy fry between the car seats or use your McDonald's bag as a placemat, then that wasn't a road trip. It was just a really long drive. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
At participating McDonald's.
Sergeant and Mrs. Smith, you're going to love this house.
Is that a tub in the kitchen?
There's no field manual for finding the right home. But when you do, USAA Homeowners Insurance can help protect it the right way. Restrictions apply.
Keep your table sounding like this with Cheerios Oat Crunch. It's breakfast bliss that the whole family can enjoy, with energy from whole grains to help keep you going, along with 4 unique flavors: cinnamon, berry, almond, and oats and honey. So next breakfast, remember, a little crunch goes a long way. Learn more and shop for Cheerios Oat Crunch at Cheerios.com. 24 grams to 30 grams whole grain per serving, at least 48 grams recommended daily.
TIAA is on a mission. Why? Because 54% of Black Americans don't have enough savings to retire. So in collaboration with big-name artists like Wyclef Jean, TIAA released Paper Right, new music inspiring a new financial future. With 100% of streaming sales going to a nonprofit that teaches students how to invest. Stream Paper Right now and help close the gap.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the podcast. I hope you are doing great out there in this wild, crazy world we live in. As always, I super appreciate that you are choosing to spend a little time with me. That is not lost on me. I know there's a lot you could be doing right now, so thank you very much for making me and us, because it's not just me, a part of your day. Today I'm talking to Steve from Does It Doom. He educates me on a lot of doom metal history, especially as it pertains to gear. We really get into it on this episode, and we talk about him, how he got started, and, his unique place in the guitar gear world, which is pretty cool. I want to get right into the episode, but before we do, just a quick pluggery-do for the affiliate links attached to this podcast, because without all of you making your purchases through those, this thing would be just about impossible to keep going, so thank you for that. All you have to do is go to tonemob.com/sweetwater or tonemob.com/reverb if you are planning on making any purchases for the upcoming holidays as gifts for yourself or for a loved one. If you click those links and do your shopping through there, it does not cost you anything extra, but it does take a small percentage of that sale and put it towards this show. So thank you very much to everybody who's done that. I really appreciate you. And that is probably enough business for this particular episode. Let's get this right out of the way and get right into it with Steve. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Tone Mob Podcast, the show about guitar stuff, occasionally, sometimes. I'm your host, Blake Weiland, and with me today, I have Steve Reis from Does It Doom. What's going on, buddy?
Hey, Blake. Thanks a bunch for having me, man. I really appreciate it. Pretty excited to be on here today.
I'm excited to have you. I'm so curious about your story, and I've so many things I want to talk to you about. You have a very unique perspective in the gear world, I think, and you've taken a unique approach to your channel and your content that you put out there, and it seems to be really working for you. And so I want to kind of get the whole picture, but obviously you focus on Doom. Duh.
Yep.
But where did you start? Most people don't, the first thing they listen to as a child isn't necessarily doom metal. So take me from the early days up to now, and we'll just start there and see what happens.
Sure. I guess I got into, I guess the entry point for me was I started out as a big, as a punk kid, kind of listening to the Misfits and Sam Hain and Danzig. Somehow we were obsessed with that whole scene. And over time, it somehow for me, like, Minor Threat, Black Flag, and all that stuff, I feel like you would hear these discussions about Black Sabbath, right? Like just here and there of these bands being influenced. And eventually that took me to the Sabbath thing. which just became something that was probably and is still my favorite band of all time. And then through that band, I guess, and other bands, I started somehow got into Down, and obviously everybody's listening to Pantera and got into Down. And you started to, especially around when the Down 2 record came out, in the interviews and stuff, the guys would always talk about bands like Pentagram and Witchfinder General and St. Vitus, even Sleep and stuff. And you'd see them wearing the t-shirts and talking about it in interviews. And through that, I actually just got interested in the bands of the respective members, like Jimmy Bower and I Hate God, and Kirk and Crowbar, COC, which are kind of make up the New Orleans sludge scene, and their range of influences and continual discussion of this doom metal idea or what have you. And that just had me diving in and discovering all of these other bands that kind of just became certainly one of my favorite genres of music, and eventually, ultimately, my favorite genre of music. But I just started to dig into all these bands that they discussed. And, I discovered Pagan Altar. And like I said, listening to St. Vitus and The Obsessed and all the old doom bands and Pentagram and things like that. And this was in the, I guess, 2002 was about this time that I discovered that scene, and kind of then just dove down the rabbit hole and have been a big fan of the genre ever since.
Yeah, I probably what would be considered a casual fan, or maybe even a poser by some standards. But I found it through kind of weird channels. Like you, I started with the punk scene, and that's always been a big part of my life. But I remember like reading alternative press when one of the High on Fire records come out, and I was like, what is this? First of all, I loved the name. I was just like, this is a cool name.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about this band, but that sounds cool. And working through there, and I always found myself, even if I didn't dive deep into like all of the different bands, obviously like I found Sleep and I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
Like, wow, I didn't know you could do this. And the people would like listen to it, not because it's bad, but because it's like, this seems so counterintuitive to, I'm used to like high BPM, like super fast punk stuff and things like that. And I was like, this is so heavy in a different way.
Right.
That I don't think a lot of people fully understand. And now it's almost become kind of one of the more mainstream forms of metal, I think. At least that's my viewpoint on it.
Yeah, I would agree. And that's been the interesting thing over the past 20 years, because, it seemed certainly when I was, and, the circle of friends I was with, were discovering it in these early 2000s, it seemed like a very obscure genre. And, of course, we discovered Sleep around the time of the Holy Mountain, or discovered Holy Mountain after it had been released, but before the Jerusalem Dope Smoker stuff really hit. And, they obviously sounded Sabbathy, and that whole record was really cool and different. And then they dropped Dope Smoker, and that thing was just monumental. And I clearly, up to this point, has been a hugely influential record in terms of, this band attempting to record this hour-long song, and, the whole stoner caravan theme and everything that went along with it, with the guitar tones and the mad amps and the big fuzzed out sound and guitar tone. And I think that album kind of changed the course of everything. At least was one of them that truly impacted the scene and started bringing forward the kind of next wave and evolution of the genre, along with bands like Electric Wizard as well.
Yeah, it does seem like you were talking about with Down. It seems it's in a somewhat smaller scale, but like Pantera and by proxy Down did for Doom sort of what Metallica did for the Misfits. Like it brought a bunch of people in that never would have heard it before. Like they're just like, wow, this is cool. Like, right. I think one of my favorite bands likes it, so I got to check it out, right? And it's this weird backwards thing that happens not as often as it probably should. But that seems like a very direct correlation in a way I hadn't really thought of before.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It just kind of shined the spotlight on this obscure genre and this kind of bunch of artists that had been doing things, through the 80s and 90s and just had not kind of been brought to the forefront. And like you're saying, Phil wearing shirts and all the guys in the Phil and Pepper and Kirk and Jimmy. And that's what I definitely remember, just seeing the St. Vitus, like the V shirts and seeing the pentagram shirts and even the sleep shirts. And then in interviews, like I said, they're just always talking about it. And it just led me down to dive in. And then I just couldn't help but like it. It's just like slow but kind of sometimes groove oriented and bluesy, but dissonant, and kind of had the evil undertones and everything kind of cool, just as a kid growing up and through your teenage years. I don't know. It was just something really cool and different, and feeling like you had discovered something that was even further away from the mainstream,
Yeah, there's something about like every single scene in every single city. Like there's always one kid that's into one thing and he's like, yeah, you wouldn't get it, man. And it's
right.
And sometimes those end up being massive subcultures, which is kind of like the irony of the whole thing. Like I remember there was these kids I went to school with that were really into grindcore, and they were always, kind of poo-pooing all of us punk rockers. And it was kind of funny. I just, and I'm like, man, these are just these weird kids that like this insanely aggressive music. And it wasn't until years later I found out, I'm like, oh, there's like hundreds of thousands of kids that like this kind of thing. Like this is huge. It's not as obscure as they wanted to make it sound like it was.
And that's probably a byproduct of of just the internet, right? And the ability for all of us who were, maybe and not able to connect in 2002, or not as easily, there were message forums and things like that. But, you get the Facebook groups and all of the social media now, and it just seems like the scenes have all gotten bigger because you can connect better with other people who are interested.
Which is exactly what happens with like the whole gear community too.
Yeah.
Like, so you got all of these people that from all of these different genres that are all coming together about pedals.
Yeah.
And it's kind of this weird melting pot. Like if you get into like the Tone Mob Facebook group or, any of the, quote unquote gear forums and pieces that are all over the internet, you're going to have a wide swath of people, from like people who just like blues to shoegaze to doom metal to thrash. Like I don't think there's a genre that's left untouched when it comes to the gear community.
No, absolutely not.
It's a funny distillation. Like we all come together for reverb and buzz.
So true.
So was there some sort of like aha moment that made you want to start putting out content specific to it, other than it just being like your direct passion? Was it like you identified a hole, or what was that?
I mean, I had kind of, interestingly enough, I got really into the blues in the early, like in around 2010. And this was kind of through the getting re-obsessed with Black Sabbath at some point. I had stopped playing guitar for a while, and I picked up the guitar again, and I was this was like 2010, maybe, I don't know. I hadn't played in a while, and I was going to just start learning Black Sabbath songs was my plan. And so I kind of went through and had been messing around and doing that, and kind of had discovered like, oh, Tony was actually started off as a blues player. And so I started diving into the blues and really trying to learn Chicago blues and things like that, and had discovered what was Stevie Snacks at the time, Texas Blues Alley with Anthony Stauffer, and learning guitar now with John Tuggle, and had kind of watched them do these really cool lessons and stuff, and had bought some of their courses and joined their memberships and whatnot. And so oddly enough, that I kind of learning from that, and then coming back to Doom, I was like, I want to take this genre that I've loved forever and try and put that kind of lesson presentation together and just do it for free on YouTube. I could feel like the scene had gotten much bigger, right? This is 10 years plus after I or well beyond that, 15 years. We're talking 2017 or something. So 15 years after I had discovered it, and the scene had seemingly got much bigger, but there was no real content on YouTube in terms of like instructional content on how to play, at least not consistently produced at a reasonable production level on a consistent basis and things of that nature, regarding some of these bands. And so I looked at Sleep, which has been one of my favorite bands forever, and decided, well, I'm just going to make a couple of sleep lessons, and they're terrible. If you go back, like I didn't have the gear to do it properly or anything, but I was going to try to present the material in the way that a couple of these instructors who I really admired and had learned a lot from had presented the material. So I took it on from that standpoint and started doing it. And I didn't know. I thought people were going to be like, man, I didn't, you just didn't know. Like I thought people were going to be like, screw this guy, this sucks, blah, blah, blah. But they weren't. It was like the absolute opposite. It was like, a starving audience. You have this big group of people who are wanting to learn this stuff, but there's no content out there surrounding it. So I put out a couple sleep lessons and people were just watching them like crazy. And, where they were getting shared around online and people started asking, well, do High on Fire. And then it was like, do Electric Wizard, and do Windhand and Conan. And people were asking for a lot of the modern stuff. And so I've Monolord, and I dug in and started doing that stuff and sludge stuff and I Hate God and Acid King and just started diving in and teaching these songs and trying to present them in a way that there was, we're kind of focused on the gear, how you get the tone, but playing the riffs in the right tunings. So to make sure there's a lot of tabs online for this stuff, or at least there's some, but usually they're in the wrong tunings and played positionally, in the wrong spot compared to how the actual artist or band would play the song. So I spend a lot of time focused on that, like getting it correct, making sure the tone's in the ballpark, using gear that's correct to what or at least reasonably ballpark to what the artist had used, the right tuning, the right positions, studying a lot of live footage and trying to put forth a really good product for everyone so they could start learning this style of music, blending in a little bit of music theory, applying it to Doom so people could understand what scales show up over and over and over. Like I could tell you it's not a lot, It's like there's 4 different scales that get used in every Doom song. I'm exaggerating, but pretty much. And so kind of trying to break it down and help people understand the genre that was, I would assume, seen by many as kind of mysterious and a bit different and slow. And it's been a lot of fun, so that's kind of how it all got started. And that was the focus. My main focus for at least a couple years was just doing that. And that led to gear demos, right? A lot of the pedal builders in the niche had started to reach out and ask if I would do some demos because I had picked some of my favorite pedals that I had on hand and started demoing them and not playing the standard fare that you would get, right? Like I would play the riffs and the downtune stuff and play it in a way that was probably different from what you'd get with most pedal demos, I would say, at least targeted towards the Doom genre. So I felt like at the time when I started, there really wasn't much there, and certainly not someone who would get on camera, face to camera, and talk and do it in a fully produced way.
The gear in that world is always really interesting because I think not exclusively, obviously, because a lot of it goes back to Iommi, but a lot of the bands seem to have made unpopular gear popular again, specifically like Sun amps.
Sure,
is a big one.
Yeah,
I mean, there's been other people. I mean, everyone hold on to your hats because I think the Model T, or not the Model T, the Beta leads are about to go through the roof because I just saw Adam Jones was talking about them, how he used those on some of the Tool records. I'm like, oh boy.
Yeah, I mean,
glad I got one when I could.
They started out probably, $350 you could get a Beta lead, and now you're kind of more in the $850 range and probably higher. You see them for $1,000 often enough. But I was lucky to get my Model T before the huge price spike, where people recently have been listing Gen 1, Gen 2 Model Ts for $5,000-$6,000. I mean, I don't know that they actually sell, but it's certainly the genre still is very obsessed with, and it has migrated. I feel like early on, like earlier Doom, classic Doom and stuff was more of the, evil satanic flair. And then it switched and you started to bring in like more of the stoner themes. But now there's just a big theme behind just huge amounts of wattage and amps and, thundering low end and tons of speaker cabs, and it's the genre has migrated a bit in that direction of just like massive amounts of volume.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's been interesting to see, I guess. Point being, just the gear focus is just heavy, which it is in all genres, I guess. But I feel like it's still analog focused. People are still after tube amps and big loud tube amps, whereas some genres have gone away and used more of the modeling type digital softwares and things.
I think for specifically for metal, that Doom is the last one that is like the amps are a focus.
Yeah.
Like not just a focus for the sound, but they're a part of the show.
Yeah.
Like it wouldn't be the same to go see Matt Pike without a wall of orange amps.
Yeah.
Like, it wouldn't really make any sense. I wouldn't want to see him play a Helix, I mean, I'm sure he would make it sound fantastic, but it wouldn't be the same. And I think that and this is controversial, I don't even care if half the cabs are empty, as long as I get that visual performance.
The 12 orange cabs and all the heads and the 200 watt Thunderburbs and dual darks. And, it's just cool to see, right?
It is. It's just cool. There's no way around it.
Yeah.
I don't really see that going away, which probably makes touring in a Doom band really difficult.
Yeah,
you're in this heavy subgenre that you have to bring all this stuff to.
It's on the rise,
be a nightmare.
if anything. You just watch the cab companies and kind of what they're focused on, and you're seeing a lot of 15s and multiple, just more and more speakers covering a wider range of frequencies, and cabs getting bigger and bigger, and just trying to focus low end from the guitarist standpoint. So it's almost still on the rise. I feel like it hasn't even peaked.
So for your average guitar player, or say your average doom metal fan who probably isn't going to be, opening up for Matt Pike anytime soon, but wants to try to get some of that feel and sound, at a more reasonable level, what's a good amp for them to look at?
Yeah, I think one of the cool amps out there still is the Orange OR15. A 15 watt head that kind of has that sound, always sounds really good recorded. They're $450, $500, sometimes down to $350, 15 watt head. And if there's lots of guys using those for demos online, and I've been tempted myself to pick one up a time or two, because they just always end up sounding really good, especially with fuzz pedals and whatnot. So I like that one. That's a cool option for someone just looking to kind of do something in their bedroom or what have you.
And if somebody is trying to play, a bigger show, are there still any unsung gems out there that you're ready to reveal to the world, or has it all been pretty much mined?
I mean, things continue to be mined. I still feel like the old mid 80s Laney AOR amps are really good, high wattage, high volume, great sounding Doom amps. I guess famously used by Matt Pike on Holy Mountain. Liz used one in Electric Wizard. And so though they have like the low input is really clean, and then you've got the AOR side of the amp that is really unique and awesome, in my opinion, in terms of how the EQ works and whatnot. So you could still find those 50 waters for $500, 100 watts, 7 or 8. I mean, I still have people tell me they get them for 100 watt for $500. So those are still really killer amps, I feel. They've got combo versions, 30 watt, 50 watt, 100 watt combos, and then they had 30, 50, 100 watt heads, kind of all through the 80s. And that's the amp I usually tell people, that's a bit of a sleeper still, although again, they've went up in price, but they're still reasonable to get your hands on one.
Cool. Good to know. And there went the reverb prices. But I can't help but maybe you can clarify some of this for me. I haven't done enough research to be super familiar, but I have had people ask me about this before, but I bet you know more. What is the story with Matamp, Orange, Green? Like how does that all tie together? I know there's a story there, but I don't know what it is.
So Matt Mathias was his name, who started Matamp in the 60s. And they're just a standalone company, and you can still see their GT100s and Series 2000s, I think, and things like that pop up on Reverb now and then. But the Orange Music Shop that I guess was, I believe, in London, I'm probably going to mix up some details here, but was wanting to build amplifiers. And so they went to Matamp and asked, hey, can you build some amplifiers with our branding on them? And so they said sure, and they started building amps that looked a lot like the Matamps of the era, but were obviously labeled Orange, and then you'd see Matamp underneath the Orange. And they were sold through that music shop throughout that era, throughout the 70s, I guess. And so the companies were still separate, but were working together. And then at some point, the original Matamp shop shut down, and I believe Orange shut down as well, until I believe in the early 90s, Gibson bought the Orange brand. And the Matamp shop had also changed hands at the time. And so they were then entirely separate in the early 90s. I say that for a second. Matamp released the Green line, and this was, again, a new version of Matamp, essentially in tribute to Peter Green, who was one of the first players to play Matamps, in Fleetwood Mac in what would have been the very early 70s, like 71 or so. And so in tribute to him, they released the Green series. And then at the same time, Orange kind of was bought by Gibson or whatever. And they actually initially had the Matamp shop build some of those amplifiers.
Oh, okay.
And so they were being sold as Orange, and even in the later years through the 70s, the Matamp branding went away on the Orange amps, and you'll see like there's this transition where then they just say Orange. And so they were kind of two separate companies then at that point, but Gibson had recommissioned Matamp to build the Orange amps of that era. And then Gibson ended up selling that brand off to someone else, to the Orange brand that it is today. And that Matamp, I think, again changed hands, but is still functioning as a small custom shop in the UK. And they still build all of their amplifiers, and they're all built to order. And you can order one today, and it's, you have to do the whole, it's kind of a pre-order and you wait on it. Whereas Orange kind of whoever took over ownership of the Orange brand was able to essentially, blow it up into what it is today, and kind of in some ways abandon a lot of the older amplifiers, to a certain degree. They were doing more of them a decade ago, but have kind of moved on to their own signature line that doesn't have so much in common with those older Matamps. Gotcha.
Okay, thanks for clearing that up. I was genuinely like, this is going to be the perfect guy to talk to about this. But I have, I don't know if you've seen it, but I actually recently got a Orange 212 cab that was super clean, like insanely clean. I think it just got parked in some dude's basement forever. And it's from somewhere. I contacted Orange, and I have been talking to some pretty knowledgeable people over there, and also another tech in the UK. And we're thinking it's in that early 70s era sometime.
Nice. Very
It's a
cool.
212 with the orange labeled creambacks in it. And it just sounds so good. It doesn't matter what I plug into it.
That's super cool. And it's super clean, you're saying.
Oh yeah, it's like brand new.
That's cool.
It's kind of insane. I don't know, and actually came with the cover, the original like vinyl cover, and it's in super good shape too. So yeah, that's one of the treasures that I've dug up over the years.
Cool.
I traded a guitar for it, and that's not something I do. I'm a hoarder of gear. I don't get rid of things.
Yeah,
but
I'm pretty bad myself.
I figured I could probably find another Rickenbacker, and I don't think I'm going to see another one of these cabs in Oregon anytime soon.
They're hard to find, and certainly in that kind of condition. My Orange is actually, I've got an OR120 and matching cab that was built by Matamp in the 90s. So one of the 90s Gibson issued Orange amps.
So cool. I love hearing the history behind these kinds of things, especially like kind of being involved in the newer gear world. And it makes you wonder, certainly I don't think Jamie from EQD like thought that there would probably be stories about their company when he first started, but I have a feeling that there's going to be a lot of EQD stories,
sure.
in the future. It's just kind of a funny the guitar world's a funny place. We all
Yes.
get very obsessed about these things.
Very obsessed.
So, speaking of pedals, you've been making pedals.
Yes.
Some very cool pedals, actually, as I did finally get to plug those things in and rip. And
Awesome.
man, I can't believe how much you've squeezed out of one knob on both of these things.
I'm glad
it's insane.
I'm glad you like them. It was a bit of a natural evolution for us. We started out building pedal boards. Me and my best friend kind of got together and decided we would do that. And we took that and had built pedal boards for a while. And I'm an engineer by trade, and he's also an engineer by trade. And we had ended up manufacturing a bunch of those, and then ended up passing that manufacturing over to Mojotone, also here in North Carolina. And
Okay.
as we ended up handing off that manufacturing, it kind of opened the door for us to do something else. And pedals was just the next natural thing. Just because I was really interested in trying to give it a go, and we had enough good friends and people we'd worked with that we felt like we could put together a solid team and kind of go for it. And we decided to start out of the gate with this kind of one knob series of pedals. Basically, I wanted for myself green ringer style analog octave on a clean blend. And so that became our first pedal, which was our Hyper Coven. And, typically when you see that kind of circuit, it doesn't have any sort of knob on it. It's just a single stomp. But something that became really popular with Earthquaker's Life pedal was to have this analog octave sound, but have it be blendable. And so that was the first thing we approached, because it's just really fun within the genre to apply that style effect to various dirt pedals and, rat distortions and big muffs. And I've got all these rat variants here. And so it's really fun to give it that octave effect. But if you have it on full, it just doesn't really work well for the drone stuff. You kind of need to be able to back it off. So that's where it started. And then we branched out from there, and did a couple more pedals, like a boost and a fuzz, and ended up, the two I sent you were the two latest we released, which was our Sabathie Fuzz and our Valpurgis. And the Sabathie Fuzz is a one knob. I guess we just decided to continue on the one knob idea because it was working. People seemed to really like it. We had really great response from it, and kind of nobody had done it, like focused on like, what can we stuff in a one knob pedal? And it may get kind of ridiculous with our latest release, but it still came out sounding awesome. So like the Sabathie is based on the Boss FC2 Hyper Fuzz, and we had never seen someone do that in a single knob version, right? Everybody takes the fuzz face and puts it in a single knob, but nobody had ever taken the FC2 Hyper Fuzz and kind of put it in a single knob version. So we did our own little take on that pedal, and that became our Sabathie Fuzz. And then this Valpurgis, which was interesting. I listened to your podcast with John from EAE a couple weeks ago, and he talked about Nick Williams, formerly of Dunwich. And we brought Nick on to help with this design, which was a really, really fun one to work on. And kind of he joined our group to help with that, which is essentially a JFET emulation of a Laney supergroup amplifier that Tony Iommi would have used in the late 60s through the 70s. And then we added a modified Rangemaster circuit that works on a blend. So you've got this one knob Iommi Black Sabbath in a box pedal that's kind of, I feel like, never really been done before. And just Nick is just amazing. He's just been working on preamp emulations for a very long time, and just has the process down really well. And the thing just came out amazing. I mean, it was like a year in development. Took us forever to because you got to set the EQ, right? It's all, you're going to be fixed EQ. We could have done a multi-knob, but decided to just get really adventurous with the single knob. And hopefully, what we've seen, that we launched that in mid-November, and the response has been really amazing. So it's just, that one makes me feel like a kid again, just like being 16, 15 years old, discovering Black Sabbath. And we really tried to nail like Tony's mid-70s live tone. And I hope we've done it. I've spent my life listening to that stuff and having the gear. I have an old super group. I have a mid-60s SG special. I've got all the Rangemasters. And so really have chased that tone over the years. So that pedal was kind of the culmination of that tone chase and wanting to be able to give it to people in what would be, kind of a very simple, easy, you just turn the knob and rotate it up and it'll kind of take you through the Sabbath eras and without having to go chase down all this crazy vintage super groups and things of that nature.
I was really surprised how well it worked at exactly its mission.
No, awesome.
For being a single knob. I plugged it into my Fender Fender 75 head. And that's just a big, loud, clean amp. Like which actually would probably work well for certain genres of Doom.
Absolutely.
Or certain sections of Doom now that I think about it. Yeah. I plugged it in there. It's always my like bass because it's so new. It's not neutral. It still has that Fender scoop thing going on.
Yeah.
But it's really hard to get it to break up on its own. So it's good for kind of just seeing what the pedal's going to do.
Sure.
And I was like, wow, this is okay. This is definitely the Tony sound. Like this is I was really impressed with it. And I was also really impressed. Not to make this like a big commercial in the middle of things, but like I was really impressed out of the box. I was like, the fit and finish on these is really, really nice. Like,
well, thank you.
I spend a lot of time looking at a lot of pedals and helping people with different things. And I spend so much time in pedal land, and it's not too often that I get one out of the box that I've never really heard much of before. And I'm like, wow, the details, you really nailed it.
Well,
and
thank you.
I love it.
Yeah, we've got just an awesome team of people, working within the Does It Doom the pedal side of the company, I guess. And like I said, my best friend is part of that. And we brought on other engineers. I guess it's 5 core engineers who've all worked in industry and are all very detail oriented, like people. And I'm big on the aesthetic. We work with Chris at Earthward Art on Instagram, who does all of our artwork, and he's just great with capturing the kind of occult vibe that we're after, and just making really awesome monochromatic pedal artwork, which he's done work for Black Arts Toneworks. He did a bunch of work for Dunwich over the years, and just some of my favorite pedal art. And so he was kind of the guy when I wanted to do it. And we hooked up with Obscura Manufacturing, who is just up the road here in Lenoir, North Carolina, or in Lenoir. And they do all of our enclosures. So just really, again, and he's a super detail-oriented, guy as well, and wanting things to really be the vibe and the feel. Like we want you to open it and it to look awesome and play awesome and sound awesome. And so hopefully we've achieved that.
You did. I definitely recommend people go check out this stuff if you have not already.
Thank you.
I'm really enjoying it. And actually, because I like to do things wrong and weird all the time, after I got done playing my baritones through it, I immediately grabbed this little Groovebox synth I got in from Electron and I was like, well, let's see what happens when I just completely destroy the signal with the Sabathie in particular. And I was like, well, this works way better than I thought it was going to. This is gross in all of the right ways. I was just pummeling it with bass.
The Sabathie's a heavy fuzz for sure.
Yeah, it's great fun. Oh, it's so much fun. I love it. So one thing I wanted to ask you, obviously we've focused on the Doom, and that's your thing.
Yes.
But you think your audience would be surprised at any of your other musical tastes?
I think largely I'm a big blues fan, and I've talked about it here and there over the years. And I think people get it. I don't know if people would have dove as deep into it as I have. But like I'm a huge fan. I mentioned Peter Green. He's one of my favorite guitarists of all time, but I've spent tons of time just studying guys like Freddie King and Albert King and B.B. King and Otis Rush. And I'm a big slide guitar fan. And so I don't know if they would be surprised. I think a lot of the people in the doom metal community are they may not listen to it, but I think they would like it if they did. Because it's got that downtrodden feel a lot of the times, especially I'm a big fan of minor blues. I've actually threatened to put together a course on pure minor blues. And actually have done it, but I've never shot video for it. Like I've written a manual, the whole thing. So I don't know if they'd be too surprised at that, but that is probably my other like true love as a genre. And then I still like kind of the older metal stuff, that everybody likes as well. But I don't listen to it as much. But I like classic rock too. Like I'm a big Cream fan, and I think if people go back, you can realize if you ever check out on YouTube the Mythology recordings, which is Tony Iommi and Bill Ward of Black Sabbath, pre-Sabbath, so pre-Earth, like in the middle of the 60s, it's a blues band. They're covering songs that Clapton did on the Beano record with John Mayall, and Tony's playing as pure fire. But it's just, it all started there, I feel, and I feel like Tony was almost more Clapton focused than he was necessarily focused on guys like Freddie and Albert King, and who Clapton was more focused on, right? And so Tony kind of took what Clapton was doing and transformed it a bit and took it forward. But and I've never heard that anywhere. That's just my synopsis of it, because when you see him, you've got this album of live footage where Tony's playing all these songs that were popular because of what Eric was doing with the Blues Breakers at the time. So I don't know. It's a natural evolution. I've got a really cool playlist on Spotify, Does It Doom blues playlist that a lot of people have checked out that I've pointed them toward, where I just kind of curated tons and tons of just old blues, Chicago blues and Delta blues and everything. So that's really my other main musical interest, I would say.
It's really the blues. I think most people know at this point, we wouldn't have any rock without it, like at all. It's 100% the root of, and it's the root of so many other things. It's also obviously like hip hop and R&B also come from there. Like everything comes from the blues, and it's somewhat unfortunate that I think it's been taken in more recent times and spun as kind of a bad thing. Or not necessarily a bad thing, but something that's sort of uncool in a lot of circles. And I can understand there's like definitely some dad rock connotations with some of it, and some of that's deserved and some of it isn't. But, we wouldn't have the wide variety of music that we have today without, Robert Johnson.
Yeah.
At
absolutely.
the end of the day.
Yeah. I mean,
it just wouldn't exist.
Again, it kind of, the guys in the UK at the time took what had been done by those guys, by those early blues musicians, and transformed it into something that became rock and metal. Like, it's undeniable, right?
Mm-hmm. It's kind of funny. Like, Iommi's really an interesting case study for what because he took it and somehow made this sort of the sad music, and he made it menacing.
Yeah.
In a way that nobody had ever done before. But when you listen to him talk, he seems like a relatively like happy dude.
Yes.
Which is kind of fun. It's kind of funny to see that juxtaposition. And I think a lot of people think if they're not into heavy music or of any kind, they tend to see the whole scene as a scary thing, when most people involved in it are teddy bears. I mean, there's definitely some scary people that have been involved in metal. Let's not say there hasn't, but most people are teddy bears.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And I think when you look at Sabbath, you have to look at all of the members, because Geezer and his lyrics played a huge part. He was the main lyricist in the band, and that's a huge part of the overall imagery. I mean, I think Tony's unfortunate accident with losing his fingertips on his fretting hand led him to want to downtune. He's said before that it was, out of just necessity to play. But obviously it added to the ominous feel of the music. But even the first couple records that aren't downtuned at all have that feel to them, right? Like Black Sabbath is one of the first true heavy metal, I mean, certainly the template for Doom, but true heavy metal songs of all time. And it's in standard tuning, but the lyrics right out of the gate, right? It's just, they were intentionally trying to take what was being done in horror films and things of like that, and try and apply that. Let's scare people, right? Like, that's the story, is that Geezer saw the movie theater marquee sign that said Black Sabbath and said, why don't we call it Black Sabbath? Because people like to be scared. And so they ran with it, but clearly changed the course of history in doing so.
I was thinking about this recently. I was listening to a series on the Misfits and just like their history and things. And I was thinking about how in mainstream culture, horror movies definitely get blamed for some societal ills and whatever. But I feel like scary, quote unquote, sounding music gets blamed more, you know?
Yes. Over the years.
When really the movies have influenced the music more so than the other way around, I think, in a lot of cases, especially in the early days.
Yeah.
But it's weird how like these insanely graphic and violent movies, which don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that necessarily is a bad thing. I like horror movies a lot, but they are like, people are more like, just don't watch those. But Black Sabbath is corrupting the youth.
Right.
It's kind of a strange juxtaposition. Do you have any theories as to why that might be?
I've never thought about it before, but it is an interesting thought. And hopefully, you know, over the decades, some of that has faded a little bit, like the fight against it, right? You're not seeing the things you saw a few decades ago, at least, and maybe I don't pay close enough attention, but it is pretty interesting to think. It's like you get a freebie because it's a movie, but because it's music, it's interpreted in a different way. But I do agree with what you said there, and it's interesting to think about.
I wonder if it's because the records can be especially now, it can be a passive experience that you can take with you and sort of have around at all times, and therefore maybe they do influence you more in some ways due to the more constant exposure, especially as a teenager or a kid, where, you know, I think we've all went through periods, especially anybody that's listening to this show, where we've sat down and just, you know, obsessed over one record in our earphones as a teenager at some point, you know?
Yeah.
And that is going to influence you more than watching a movie once or twice.
And I guess movies are seen as fiction, you know, in a lot of ways, like it's seen as fiction. Whereas I don't know that there's that necessarily that feeling with music for me, you know, that I feel like, you know, you're listening to someone's art. They're both art forms, obviously, but one is intentionally fictitious and the other isn't. Like, I didn't feel like when we were listening to Sam Hain that it was meant to be funny in any way, you know what I'm saying? Like listening to Sam Hain, it was like the Misfits had taken this darker, like even darker, less horror film oriented direction, or Danzig had taken his direction to this darker place that was more, you know, I guess these pagan tribal themes and just darker, all murder, all guts, all fun, you know, just a darker turn. And it didn't seem like a fictional thing, at least at the time, you know?
Yeah, that's true. I think we can, even though the artist's intent may very well be to have it be a fictional piece, especially as kids, it may get mixed up.
Yeah.
You know, that may get twisted. And so even comic books are like more obviously, you know, a work of fiction.
Yeah.
And so when you hear, you know, the Misfits say that they're going to kill your mother, and it's like, wait, are you going to kill my mother? Like, is that really what's going on? And especially as somebody who, like, say a parent who doesn't know anything about the band, they're like, what is this? It seems more, I guess as we work through this idea, it seems more real and intentional than something that's obviously just made to entertain for a short period.
Yeah, I can
time.
say like my guitar teacher in 10th grade acoustic guitar class was not impressed when I brought in Skulls as the song for people for the class to play. Needless to say, I can remember him like reading off the page, like, everybody take this out of your book, and this is what you need to throw this away, and these are the lyrics, you know, like, you know, collect the heads of little girls, and you know what I mean, like just hack the heads off. And he wasn't singing it; he was talking it. That's a vivid memory for me. And so then the rest of the year it would be like, you know, what do you want to play? And you'd hear like all the dudes yelling Skulls from the back of the room. Just funny. Not impressed. He was not impressed. So again, you know, just not seen as a thing of fiction.
And even going, I've told this story on the podcast before, I think, but even I'm not sure if I have. I think I did, but kind of in the same direction. I wrote a short horror piece in 7th grade, and it wasn't even really that crazy, honestly. It was just like, I can't remember the exact story, and I wish I could find it, but I don't know where it is. But it basically was like this kid gets lured out the window by ghosts, like in the middle of the night, is essentially what happened. There's a lot more details to it than that. But my 7th grade teacher like kept me after class, and she was like, listen, I can't, she told us like, you can write about whatever you want. And I came up with this weird story because I liked horror stuff. And she was like, yeah, I can't have you writing this kind of occult horror ever again, or we're going to have you talk to somebody. And I remember thinking it was so strange because she gave me a really good grade on it too. Like she told me like, don't ever write this again, but I got like almost like a full score on it. So it's like, maybe it was actually pretty good for a 7th grader. And it just scared her that much. I don't know.
You need to find it.
But I didn't, I have no idea where it is. My parents might have it somewhere. I do know though that I didn't take her too seriously about it because my parents had both read it and they were like, oh, that's pretty good. And neither of them are like horror aficionados or anything. So they were just like, oh,
it didn't scare them about your mental well-being though.
No. I mean, maybe some of the music I was listening to did a little bit, but no, they were always pretty cool.
Yeah, same. I mean, I don't know. I collected comics and always kind of, again, like tended towards the dark side of the niche, right? Like I didn't want Marvel. I wanted Evil Ernie and Lady Death and Spawn and all that stuff.
What do you think it is about that? Like I definitely have an attraction to that stuff too, but there's no real reason I can point to. I just know that like as soon as I saw, Goosebumps or Are You Afraid of the Dark when I was a kid, I was like, that's what I'm into. Yeah. I like that. I have don't know why. Do you have anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, same thing. Just I don't necessarily know why. I've probably been asked why by my parents, but over the years. But I've always had that attraction to the occult kind of, but not like a serious, like in the imagery and music and like you're saying, comic books. I was just hugely into comic books, and maybe it's the fantasy thought side of it. Like it's definitely not a real thing for, you know what I'm saying? Like it's not like all of our pedals have this real cool occult imagery, but again, it's just like I view it more as that for me, right? It's more of this like take on the art and the fictional side of things.
Yeah. I mean, like I don't really think that that Eli Roth is like genuinely interested in like hacking up people, but he's pretty good at making fiction about it,
Yeah. That's very true.
And it's a very weird, thing because in the past, the art and the content that people have consumed has been pointed at as reasons for crimes and things like that. And it doesn't I can understand why you'd want to make that connection if you're like super unfamiliar with any of it.
Right.
Because it's like, wow, this is new and scary. But at the same time, there's no proof that there really is any link whatsoever. And if there was, boy, like I think we would see a whole lot more problems than we actually do end up seeing. And it's kind of a strange thing. I can understand the mental leap, but at the same time, it is a mental leap.
I would agree.
Let's see here. We got a little bit of time left here. Let's before we get into the classic questions, I like to do this thing where I let the guests, say whatever they want to say, shout out their grandpa, or anything else they want to plug or anything you want to get off your chest.
Yeah,
now's the time to do so.
If you're interested in this genre of metal or learning more about it, come check out our YouTube channel, Does It Doom. We've got, countless lessons at this point in how to play these songs and how to achieve these tones of many of the most popular songs across the genre. And you can obviously find me anywhere. You can find me on TikTok and Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and all of the standard platforms at Does It Doom. And that's what we focus on. This past year, I also started a guitar brand called Woodwright Guitars in partnership with the Woodbine Custom Shop. And we were very excited to have your Stringjoy strings on those guitars as they all shipped. We shipped them in C standard. There was no E standard going on here for the Doom crowd. And so we took some String Joy balanced heavy strings, and I guess they were 12 to 56. And so everything was set up in C standard, and we kind of brought this old first act double cut guitar back to life, which I've collected several of them over the years. And so check out Woodwright Guitars, because that's something else that's been a huge deal for Does It Doom over the past year.
Very cool. And also, thank you for letting us be a part of it. I think they look awesome, and I love what you're doing with them. And it's really cool to be strung up on something like that. That's really awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, man. I've become a big fan of your string brand before that, and have had them. I mean, they're on most of my guitars at this point.
Thank you very much.
I'm waiting for you to do some flats and half wounds, and then they'll probably be on everything.
That is so high on our list, and we are really close to being done with getting our things dialed in for that. But the problem is we have to introduce those without letting production slip on everything else. So
yeah,
it's kind of a juggling match, or a juggling match. Is that a thing? That's not a thing. But yeah, it's a
battle.
It's a balancing act.
Yeah.
That's what it is, of trying to keep production going as demand has escalated, while also like introducing really genuinely cool new products. And I'm really excited what we're doing on the flats. So
yeah, I think
we can get those out.
There's some cool bands that use flats. I think within the doom genre for sure, Slowmatics use flats. Conan has used flats at least on one record. Stephen O'Malley uses flats in Sun. And they just, they cut a bunch of high end and can sound really good with fuzz, and kind of cut the output a little bit of your guitar almost. And so obviously very popular and famous in the jazz world, but there could be some other avenues and reasons for people to try them. And half rounds are awesome too, for kind of a blend of both. But that's exciting. I'm excited to see you guys kind of doing it. I do realize it's probably a very niche thing when you look at the overall string market. It was probably hard to make the leap, but it is cool to see.
The hardest part about it is I think a lot of people don't realize how labor intensive flats are to make. There's so many steps that go into it. I mean, a lot of people don't know they're actually polished. Like,
right.
They don't just feel the way they feel because of the material. They're also like, that's a whole nother step multiple steps depending on how everyone's doing it. But it's, for us, it'll probably end up being multiple steps before the final polish. It's really, they just take a lot to make. And that's why not very many people make them.
Yeah, I mean, they're smooth as butter, right? It's like your wound strings almost feel like plain strings, and all your string noise is gone. It's just, it's very different. I don't know if you play flats on anything regularly, but
oh yeah,
to me, it's very different. When I first tried flat wound strings, I was expecting like a minor change, and I would say it's not a minor change, in my opinion.
No, no, it really changes. It almost, not entirely, but it feels almost like a different instrument.
Agree.
The way you glide around the fretboard. It's really, really a cool experience. It's not right for everything, but I do like them.
Yeah.
They're fun.
Me too. I recommend people try them. I tell people all the time, like, give them a try. You may hate them, but especially in this genre, where people are almost, there's this trend, especially with more and more use of fuzz and distortion, to back off on pickup output and things like that. As soon as you go to flats, it's like another step. I feel like a solid step back in output, and just all your string noise is gone. Can be really good for recording, at least, in my experience, with some direct recording and stuff, can just clean things up. And it's a big change. And a lot of people don't realize that just changing the strings on their guitar like that can totally change the feel and tone of the instrument. So
that'll take me into a whole nother huge rant. So yeah, like people in general, people and myself formerly in a past life overlooked that. But it's literally the thing making the sound.
Mm-hmm.
The guitar wouldn't exist without strings, yet it's one of the first things that we all just kind of go, yeah, it's a string. A string is a string, which is just not true.
I don't know what the differences in processes are and procedures and materials. I mean, I assume it's huge, but I always find your strings last long. They have a really good tuning stability for me. and you just have everything available, right? Like all the custom sets. And I just love the process of going through your website. I don't know, like I said, it's kind of become my go-to when I need strings and want to try different things. Fun. I just strung up my 12-string first act custom shop guitar with a heavy gauge 12 string set that I was able to get that otherwise you just can't go get.
Right.
And that's what's really appealing for me, all those things. So
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, man. I appreciate that.
yeah, man.
The whole crew does.
Big fan.
Okay, last couple questions. These are the classic questions.
Sure.
And this is going to be fun. I have a feeling I know what one of the answers will be, but let's see. So this is the first question. What is your favorite Boss pedal?
Yeah, I think for me it's the Hyperfuzz FC2.
That's what I thought you were going to say.
I mean,
which is why you made a version. Yeah,
that
makes sense.
That pedal is kind of the sound of Electric Wizard through the years. They've started the first album. I don't think self-titled uses it, but obviously Electric Wizard is a huge band in the doom genre, and just has stuck to that pedal basically from the Dope Throne or from Come My Fanatics and Dope Throne all the way through. And he's changed the settings that he's used on it. The early stuff's using that fuzz 2 octave fuzz, scooped octave fuzz sound, and then over the past many years, decade plus, he's been using the boost mode, which is often overlooked for how incredible the boost mode on that pedal is. And then the Fuzz 1 is a great sounding fuzz as well, which I believe he used at some points throughout their career. So that is my favorite Boss pedal for sure.
Perfect. Okay, final question. And this is the one that gets a little bit dicey, but I feel like you probably came prepared. What is your favorite kind of pizza?
My favorite kind of pizza is, I just kind of like a New York style pepperoni pizza, kind of burnt. That's my favorite kind of pizza.
There you go. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I love a nice thin crust. I love a little bit of char.
Yep.
And that New Haven style, I feel like, is kind of overlooked as well as sort of I think as far as my pizza history knowledge goes, I could be a little off on this. It's kind of the precursor to what became the NY pie. But yeah, love that thin stuff.
Yeah, Jersey's
Great.
got some good stuff too.
Oh yeah, Jersey does too. You got a favorite pizzeria you want to shout out real quick?
I like Louise's Pizza down here in Charlotte.
All right, there you go. Sweet. Well, dude, thank you so much for coming on. This was very educational for me, and I'm sure it was for lots of people. And I love what you do, so keep killing it, man.
Yeah, thanks so much, Blake. I really appreciate it. Had a great time chatting, man.
All right. For Steve, this is Blake. And as always, folks, good luck and good tones. All right, everybody. There you go. There you have it. There is the end of the show. I hope you enjoyed that episode. And if you would like more conversation, if you'd like more weirdness, more just general whatever, and you'd like to support the show, you can do that by going to tonemob.com/Patreon, where for $5 a month, you can support this podcast and also get additional content beamed directly to your ears every week. You can also find that content, if you're an Apple user, through their subscription service. So if you look in your podcast player, you'll see some episodes are available via subscription, and those are the same as the Patreon episodes. So if you want that and you'd like to support the show, that is an easy way to do that as well. And if you can't, as always, please share this with a friend. Please, please, please tell somebody about it. I know it sounds cheesy, and I know every podcast you listen to asks the same thing. But if this one means anything to you, I would really, really appreciate you sharing this with somebody. It really helps out more than you might know. Talk about it in your favorite gear community. I heard on the Tone Mob podcast that those Desert Doom pedals are pretty cool. That's one way you can do it. I know a lot of us are the sole gearhead in our neck of the woods, and our communities for that kind of thing are online. So any plug that you can do that makes sense and isn't cheesy and like spammy, I'm all for it. So thank you so much for everyone that's done that. Thank you for tuning in, and I will talk to you very soon. See you on the internet. One last thing before we totally sign off here. I just want to remind you that if you do any shopping at Stringjoy, that's Stringjoy guitar strings made in Nashville, that will help me out as well. As I've said for years, I'm heavily involved in that company, and I really do think they're making the best products on the market. So if you would like to try custom strings, go to tonemob.com/stringjoy and check them out today. I seriously love what the team down there is doing. I help them out with all kinds of things, and by you supporting them, you are also supporting me as well. And hey, you need some strings, so why not get some custom strings just for your guitar and playing style? Again, the link for that is tonemob.com/stringjoy, and that will take you right to their website, and you can do all your shopping through there, and that will help everyone involved out. So thank you very much. Talk to you next time. We are brought to you by the wonderful folks at Gun Street Wiring Shop. Yes, Gun Street Wiring Shop. I've talked about them before. I used to say based out of Bend, Oregon, but guess what? Sean moved to my neck of the woods. Sean's in Portland. Sean is awesome and has helped me with a bunch of stuff lately. And if you have wiring needs for your guitar, he can help you too. If you want to get weird with it, he can get weird. If you just need to spruce things up a little bit, there's your guy. He takes all the guesswork out of doing your guitar wiring, and he makes it simple, and his customer service is top-notch, and I can't say enough good things about Gun Street as a company. I really respect Sean and what he's all about, and the product is top-notch. I've got 3 different guitars that now have Gun Street harnesses in them, and I could not be happier. So go to gunstreetwiringshop.com and check them out.